The following program includes graphic images and mature subject matter intended for adult audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Tonight on 16 by 9, the Canadian who got a gun.
So you knew you were going to kill him that day?
If I didn't know, people couldn't have an idiot.
On this American website.
You can get a military-style assault weapon, no questions asked.
And killed a woman in cold blood.
Jitka was shot 6 times at close range with a .40 caliber bullet in her face.
And watch what happens when you take city sounds.
You know, this whole piece is literally about making music out of a city.
Add some kids.
First, me and Andy, we were kind of thinking about what to do. We were trying to make some music.
And a symphony. Then stir it all up in a high-tech lab. Here's Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening and welcome to 16 by 9. Jitka Vessel is one casualty in a long list of Americans killed by gun violence every year. But her story carries a cautionary message about just how easy it is to buy firearms. U.S. lawmakers began debating gun legislation this week amid growing calls for reform. And as 16 by 9 found in this undercover investigation, it remains shockingly easy for anyone, even Canadians, to get their hands on a deadly weapon with little more than the click of a mouse. And a warning, this story has graphic images and language. Here's Robin Stickley.
Newtown, Aurora, Columbine. They were once unknown towns. Now, their names are forever stained with tragic stories of unthinkable violence. And every time another town is added to that grim roll call, there is mourning, reflection, and demand for change.
It's time for Congress to require a universal background check for anyone trying to buy a gun.
But that is easier said than done.
It's surprising that our laws in America are so backward.
Lawyer Jonathan Lowy has been lobbying Congress for years to close a dangerous loophole in U.S. gun laws.
There is this system where background checks are required if you buy a gun from a licensed dealer to prevent felons, domestic abusers, dangerously mentally ill from getting guns. And yet, for no rational reason, we have this gaping hole where people can simply choose to go another route, buy guns from an unlicensed seller, no questions asked, no background check. That makes no sense.
The ease of purchasing weapons in the United States is unimaginable.
Teresa O'Rourke experienced the horror of that deadly loophole April 13th, 2011, when her best friend Jitka Vessel was murdered. She was just 36 years old.
Life isn't the same, and it'll never be the same. Everything is shadowed by the empty chair that's sitting in your kitchen table. And that's what our lives are. This is what life is like as a survivor of gun crimes. It's a never-ending nightmare.
Now, memories are all that's left of what should have been a lifelong friendship.
Oh, well, the first time I met Jitka, we were in the 4th grade. We were about 10 years old.
They traveled together, laughed together, even lived together at this house.
She was the greatest person I've ever met. And I love her. I love her, and I'm so fortunate to have met her. And it's so hard that she's not here because she should be here. We were supposed to grow old together, just shuffling old ladies down the street, and that's what we should be doing.
In August 2008, those plans would change drastically with a chance online meeting between Jitka and a Canadian named Dmitry Smirnov.
She had met Smirnov on a gaming site, playing World of Warcraft, playing a video game. And he was troubled. And he was having a difficult time adjusting to life in Canada. He was an immigrant. Jitka was also an immigrant, you know, from the same region. And she was trying to mentor him, to help him.
4 months after they met, Smirnov visited Jitka in Chicago.
I met him, and he was the most unremarkable, unmemorable person I've ever seen. There was no relationship. This wasn't boyfriend, girlfriend. This was, you know, a woman who wanted to reach out to somebody who felt he didn't have anyone to reach out to.
But it was clear Jitka had made a much deeper impression on Smirnov.
And clearly he must have misinterpreted or been so desperate for a connection with anyone that he just latched on to this connection and wanted to make it his and his alone. He had gotten home and started threatening her on the internet. She didn't respond to any of his emails. She changed her phone number. She moved. So that really kind of thought, okay, well, there's the end of it. Someplace sort of in that back of your head, you think, should I be worried about this? But it was, oh, you know, he lives in Canada. He lives halfway across the country. He lives on a whole other side of Canada. So what is there really to worry about?
But on the other side of Canada, Smirnov started planning Jitka's murder. And he knew just where to start.
You simply get on the website, find a seller, and call up and arrange a sale. And you can do it, no questions asked, no paperwork.
There are an estimated 4,000 online marketplaces in the United States where anyone can buy a gun, like armslist.com.
It infuriates me that this arms list is able to be in business. It's infuriating that they make money off circumventing our laws. And that's what it is. This private seller loophole was never intended to be an open-air market, an open-air bazaar for the illegal sale of weapons. It was always meant so you could pass down your weapons to your children.
As a Canadian, Smirnov was not legally allowed to buy a gun in the United States, but he went to a place he knew he could get one with no paper trail.
It's, the click of the mouse. You can get a gun, you can get a military-style assault weapon, no questions asked, even if you are clearly prohibited from buying guns and could not get a gun from a licensed gun dealer.
This is where Dmitry Smirnov found a .40 caliber handgun and made arrangements to meet the seller in Washington state. He got in his car and drove south across the border. The first part of his plan, to commit a cold-blooded murder.
Next, a killer's confession.
And he kept shooting at her, and then she fell down, shot her a couple more times in the head to kill her.
Cold-blooded. Just cold-blooded.
The following program includes graphic images and mature subject matter intended for adult audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
For 16 years, Detective Val Torlo has been a cop in the Chicago suburb of Oak Brook, Illinois. But all that experience could not prepare him for what happened April 13th, 2011.
I was at home. We were all called in. It's something that doesn't happen every day in Oak Brook, so it's a big deal.
He was called to a parking lot where 36-year-old Jitka Vessel's body was lying in a pool of blood.
We had a numerous amount of rounds on the ground. I believe it was about 11 rounds on the ground. And body was completely lifeless. It touches you. You think about it. You go back and think about it a lot of times.
While Oak Brook police were securing the scene, Detective Torlow got a phone call from Chicago police who said they were speaking with a man claiming to be the murderer.
He says that, you know, he shot her multiple times. He described the type of caliber bullet it was. It described the kind of gun it was. He also described that while he was shooting her, that the magazine in the gun had fallen out and it was on the scene still. And
So you knew this was Smirnoff?
It was the killer for sure on the phone.
Smirnoff had found the gun on armslist.com and bought it from this man, Benedict Ladera, before continuing towards Chicago.
As Dimitri went on east, he stopped at in a forest preserve or some type of forest and fired the gun, test fired it. Is what he was telling us. So he gets into the Chicagoland area, did some type of a internet search on her name and found the address.
He made it sound like he might kill her at her apartment.
Right. He thought about killing her there, but he said there was too many people there. So what he ends up doing is he goes to an electronics store and buys a GPS tracking device, and he crazy glues it on the bottom of her car. And he followed her around different places where she was at. And a couple different times he thought about killing her, but it was just too many people around.
So he waited until he found the perfect place. The dark, empty parking lot of the Czech Museum where Jitka volunteered. Then he got out of his car and hid behind a dumpster.
He says that he sits back, watches her leave. As she's walking to her car, and he kind of walks across the parking lot. And I asked him, did she see you? He says no, and he went on to say it was like maybe she had like this feeling that somebody was coming up on her because it felt like she was trying to get to her car a little bit faster. And then he moved onto her faster.
And then, without a word, Smirnoff started firing.
He just shot her the first time, shot her in the side. She was holding a cup of coffee in her hand. He said that she screamed. And then she turned towards him and like threw the coffee at him, and she started running back towards the building. At this point, he fires at her one or two more times, he says. The magazine in the gun falls out, takes another magazine that he has in his pocket, puts it in the gun, runs after her, and shoots her in the back as she falls down. And when she falls down, he goes and stands over the top of her and fires, I don't know exactly how many rounds, but at least 5 or 6 more rounds into the back of her head. He said he thought about killing himself at that point, and he's just too much of a coward to do it. And he left.
Soon after he left the scene, Smirnoff panicked and sent this frantic email confession to a friend begging for help.
It was chilling. I mean, it was one of those things you read and there's like, am I reading what I'm reading here? And it was just unbelievable.
Phil, I want you to have a seat right here.
Eventually, Smirnoff turned himself in and gave a rambling, matter-of-fact confession.
If we asked him a question, he'd even give us more information than we asked him for. He just was very forthcoming with all the information and what he did.
I kept shooting at her, and then she fell down. Shot her a couple more times in the head to kill her.
So you knew you were going to kill her that day?
Yeah, I didn't want to take. If I didn't, I would look like an idiot. She would just laugh at me.
basically, he faulted Yitka for ruining his life. He was under the impression that they were, you know, an item. You know, they were dating. They had a relationship.
And I thought she would recognize me, but apparently she didn't. Then she just, you know, glanced at me and then just continued to her car.
I think 11 bullets were recovered from Yitka's body, and I think we recovered 11 bullets on the scene, or 11 shell casings. So it seems like every bullet entered her body.
I would never even have the guts to kill her then, but because of her, like, ignorance for 2 years, just all the anger just blew up, you know.
He had one request, and it was to talk to Yitka's boyfriend, and if we could set that up with him, because he wanted to talk to him.
What do you want to talk to him about?
I don't know, I just want to see how he feels. I just want to see him feel like the way I did when I lost her.
Cold-blooded. Just cold-blooded. Something that, you know what, we'll probably never see again. Something that cold-blooded here.
The next day, Teresa O'Rourke tried to phone Jitka and found out her best friend had been murdered.
I'm like, why would you say such a horrible thing? Why would you tell me why would you make up this horrible lie? And no, this isn't a lie. And I honestly don't know what I did next. Jitka was shot 6 times at close range with a .40 caliber bullet in her face. Dmitry Smirnov's a coward. Jitka could have fought him had he had a knife, had he had a baseball bat. She could have outrun him. If he had a car, she could have jumped out of the way. She could have fought. There's not a person on this earth, not a person alive who can fight a .40 caliber weapon. And what I will tell you, I know she fought, because she was shot twice. Turned around, she threw her coffee at this man, and she fought with everything she had. She fought. And she ran 18 feet before she couldn't run anymore. And that's the first time that coward went up to her. Because before that, when she was fighting, he did it from a distance because he had a gun.
The murder was so brutal, Jitka's face so disfigured, her family and friends were not even allowed one last look.
We will never have that closure. We will never have that opportunity to have looked at her and said goodbye. And the only way we got to say goodbye to her and to see her was to watch her casket go into the crematorium, and that's our closure.
Would Jitka still be alive today if the loophole didn't exist?
Yes.
No question in your mind?
There's no question in my mind. Jitka Vesel would be alive today if Dmitry Smirnov hadn't gotten a gun.
Next, getting a gun.
I'm calling about the AR-15 rifle you got on Arms List.
As easy as a click. Point. Fire.
The murder of Jitka Vesel was meticulously planned and coldly executed. Dmitry Smirnov found a gun on armslist.com. He tracked Jitka, stalked her, and shot her 11 times at close range, leaving no room for error. Smirnov pleaded guilty and will spend the rest of his life in prison. The man who sold him the gun, Benedict Ladera, admitted to selling other weapons on Arms List in the past when he was desperate for cash. The Seattle area bartender made a tearful apology in court last March and pleaded guilty to the illegal transfer of a firearm. He was sentenced to 1 year and a day in prison. But Jitka's best friend, Teresa O'Rourke, believes Arms List should also be punished.
It's infuriating, and it's wrong. And in my opinion, the owners of that website should be facing charges as well. Enough's enough. I demand a plan to end gun violence.
She has gone on the offensive, pressing for new legislation in national gun control campaigns. And the Brady Center to Prevent Gun Violence has gotten involved too. Lawyer Jonathan Lowy is helping Jitka's family sue Arms List.
There's no question that Jitka's killer is extremely responsible. There's no question that the person who sold the gun to the killer is responsible. But also, Arms List is responsible because they created a website to facilitate exactly these sorts of sales.
Lowy says despite the disclaimer on the front of the site, Arms List makes it easy for users to break the law.
They should pay a price for irresponsible conduct. They should take reasonable action. There's a lot of things Arms List could have done and should have done which would prevent sales like this. Right now they have drop-down menus on Arms List where the default is an illegal sale. The default is a nationwide sale, which the sale should be limited to people in your state. Jitka Vessel paid the ultimate price. Her family paid a vast price. Arms List didn't pay any price. That's not right.
The Brady Center has been pushing for stronger gun regulations since 1981, when President Ronald Reagan was shot by John Hinckley, a mentally deranged young man who had gotten himself a gun.
On the ground, you understand?
3 other people were hit, including Reagan's press secretary, James Brady. He ended up in a wheelchair. For him and his wife, it would be the start of a crusade.
I wonder if we can see your Mahdi Egyptian.
For the last 2 decades, the Brady Center has been pushing for legislation to close what used to be known as the gun show loophole. Today, partly because of murders like Jitka's, fighting internet sales has taken on new urgency.
Thank you.
A number of years back, there was a lot of talk about gun shows, and that's still a problem where a lot of these no background check sales take place. But today, the internet is where a lot of those sales take place.
So how easy is it? A New York City operation explored private gun sales from a variety of online marketplaces.
Hi, I was calling about the AK you get there on Craigslist. I was calling about that Ruger Mini 14 you got there.
About the gun on Arms List?
For several months, investigators went undercover, answering ads and buying guns.
You're asking how much? 1,000?
Preferably nothing less than 1,000.
Here's how it works. Under federal law, gun owners can sell to anyone in their own state. They don't need to collect any information. They're not even required to ask the buyer for a background check, unless the seller has reason to believe they would fail.
Okay, but there's no background check, right?
No background check, no nothing, no.
When a seller knows the buyer can't pass a background check, they're supposed to stop the transaction. Like this man from Texas.
No background checks.
Oh, that's good, because I probably couldn't pass one. Anyway.
Oh, yeah, because you just told me that, though, I can't sell it to you.
But just listen to this phone call, where the seller laughs off the danger and the law.
Oh, that's good, because I probably couldn't pass one. So,
yeah,
anyway.
I probably couldn't either.
During the course of their investigation, more than 60% of sellers blatantly ignored the law, illegally selling guns to anybody with the cash. It seemed a little too easy. So 16 by 9 decided to try it ourselves.
I'm calling about the AR-15 rifle you got on Arms List.
And on the very first call our producer made, he was able to set up an appointment to buy a military-style assault rifle, even telling the seller he was Canadian.
I'm from Toronto.
Yeah, I don't care.
All right.
Hours later, our producer met the seller in a mall parking lot an hour south of Buffalo, New York.
Hey, how's it going? Good. Do you want to just pull around the phono, or?
Yeah, it works.
Yeah? Okay.
And sure enough, the seller appeared, showed us the brand new AR-15 rifle, and was ready to take our money.
So, let me go. I guess Walmart has a bank or something, yeah?
With the deal in place, our producer backs out at the last minute, careful not to commit a felony. It was as easy as that.
allow it to be so easy for criminals, for felons, for the mentally ill to get their hands on these weapons. It's so irresponsible.
Other high-profile shootings have been tied to online sales as well. In October, 3 people were killed at a spa in Wisconsin by a man who allegedly found his gun on Armslist.
They know this foreseeable consequence of their actions. They've read about Jitka Vessel. They've read about other shootings tied to their website, and yet they still have not changed their practices. They still try to facilitate more and more of these sales.
Every time you hear about another shooting, it does bring you back, because you know what that family is going through, and you know their process, and you know their unimaginable pain.
That pain has prompted legislators in a handful of states to tighten their laws. Last week, the governor of Connecticut signed the strictest gun control bill in the country, including a universal background check.
We have come together in a way that relatively few places in our nation have demonstrated an ability to do.
Some states have actually expanded gun rights, and new federal legislation faces an uphill battle in a deeply divided Congress, which is why Teresa vows to continue her crusade.
12,000 people are murdered every year. That's 34 people every day, 34 families every day that go through this pain, and it's never ending.
You're passionate about this.
I'm doing this because I want to prevent other families from going through this, because it's a nightmare. Because Jitka would do it for me. I know she would.
Next, one man's noise is another man's music.
This whole piece is literally about making music out of a city.